Welcome to Dear Frannie. I'm your host, Catherine LeBlanc, Fractional Chief Marketing Officer and founder of Franchise Fractionals. I am joined by Will Fraker and Alex Russo, two of the most brilliant marketers that I've had the pleasure of interacting with in franchising right now. And I will let them follow that intro up with more details on where they do their amazing marketing. So Will, why don't you take the lead?
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks for having us. Most brilliant. Okay, the bar is set so high now. I'm Will Fraker. I'm the of Brand Performance over at the Good Feet store. I've been in franchising space a little, almost 10 years now, both on the agency side and now on the client side for the last several years. So happy. Thanks for having us.
And I am Alex Russo. I'm also feeling imposter syndrome by that lovely intro. But I am a fractional CMO, and I've been in the franchising space for 5 years. I've been in strategic comms for 10 years with agencies and design firms prior to franchising. And I'm excited to dive in.
Awesome. Okay, we've got a great question queued up for you today. But first, inquiring minds want to know, what are you reading? Alex, why don't you tell us first?
Sure. So I am rereading a favorite of mine, which is called Building a Story Brand. And it is about messaging. My favorite parts of marketing are messaging and real, like getting into the weeds with the brand. Why does it exist? How does it help? What does it help with? And I think that there's a huge misconception of, well, obviously there's the misconception about branding, logo, colors, and then that's it. But with messaging, I think there's a really big miss, and I see it often, and you don't really notice when it's right and correct. But reading this book kind of helps reframe it. So it's about brands. It's instructing brands to stop talking about themselves, essentially. And your founder story, you're about, what you care about. That's all nice and well and fine, and that's important to have nailed down. But what problem are you solving, and how are you that guide for that person who's going on that quest to have their problem solved? You're there to help them and influence them and be that problem solver. But I think a lot of brands talk a lot about, here's why we matter. Here's what we care about. Here's our causes. Here's our founder story, over and over again. Clients don't care. If they do, they'll go onto your About Us page. But for the most part, they want to know, like, what can you do for me? And I think if you have to constantly say, we're the best, it's needy, it's overdone, and it doesn't ring true. Whereas if you are able to kind of, it's like show, not tell. In writing. And if you're able to kind of show why you're the best through the services or programs that you offer and kind of the testimonials, all that good stuff. But this book really kind of maps it out, how to tell that story and how to reframe your thinking. And I think it's a really great guidebook for founders, CEOs, anybody in marketing, anybody who's struggling to kind of get down their message. And it, like, sorry for the word I'm about to use, but it makes people get out their own or stop buying into their own bullshit, quite honestly, right. And why they think they're so great, and kind of gets you refocused.
Yeah, I found in the branding conversations that I have with clients, it's the hardest thing to do, and it's very simple to say. I want to communicate to people, your end user, how you make them feel. But then when you actually show them the creative and you actually show them the messaging that's going to accomplish that, they get real hung up on, but you didn't say, this about my brand or this about my brand. We have the 3 things that it's really important to say. And at the end of the day, it's hard to get through. Those 3 things aren't going to help you stand out. What is going to help you stand out is how you make your end user feel. And because the big brands do it so well, to your point, it goes unnoticed. And so I find that to be the hardest conversation that I have with budding founders and CEOs, is that they cannot get past feature benefit, and they cannot understand what it takes to tell the story about what your end user wants to feel.
Exactly. And I see it a lot in digital ad copy, where an agency takes the messaging doc that they were given by the franchisor, and they were instructed to, list out all of these amazing things about the brand in every single caption. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, you don't need to talk about yourself in 10 different bullet points or even 5 bullet points if it has nothing to do with the ad. That's not driving behavior. And it's redundant, and I think just not helpful, and it's confusing. What the client then, or the prospect, doesn't know what to focus on.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what are your thoughts on building a story brand? I love the book. It's a great guide.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's Donald Miller, right?
Yeah.
They do it so he reframed the way that I thought about this. Yeah, he has, I believe there's the analogy of like Luke Skywalker, and
Yep.
the idea that you're not, Luke, you're Yoda, right? You're there to help Luke become who he's meant to be by revealing in him all of these things. And so the whole idea though behind it's not about the feature and benefit, it's about how you play into the story, that the main character story of your customer, and what are you helping them accomplish? What are they getting back to in their life, or how does this solve a problem for them?
Mhm.
How do you fit into their story rather than you being the story?
Right.
I think that it's one of my favorite books. It's how I try to think about all the things that we do. It can be honestly really hard sometimes to really identify what that is. Brands really have to work hard about, well, how am I that in my customer's life? Because it might seem like, well, we're just a plumbing company. Like, well, how do you translate that into your copy? Well, to help the customer understand that it's, that you're there. Maybe it's that you provide emergency service and so you're there all the time. But the idea that it's not just about like, all of our technicians are the best and most trained. That's not going to get anybody to buy from you versus somebody else. So
Right.
love it. I think that's fantastic read. And I love that you said reread, because these are the kinds of books that you like, you don't want to just read once. You want to come back because it's so much good stuff in there. So love that.
Exactly. I found myself underlining, and I was like, I'm underlining everything. I just need to reread.
Yeah. Right.
That's
Right.
awesome. Will, what's on your bookshelves?
This gentleman, his name is Scott Galloway. He came across my desk years ago. He wrote a book called The Big Four, or The Four, which was an exploration, a deep dive into Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, and he was talking about them as these four big companies that basically rule our life in a lot of ways. And just like, he talks about Apple. People aren't buying a computer, they're buying brand recognition, they're buying acceptance from other people. I thought that was a fascinating, like, it's so true. And again, to the story, building story brand thing, you're not selling a computer. You could talk about that. No, you're talking about that everybody who's famous and successful has an iPhone. Don't you also want that? And I
Mhm.
thought that was fascinating. So Scott came out with a new book recently called The Algebra of Wealth. And this is not marketing focused in particular. He talked about how to build wealth, and how to understand what wealth actually means. Because sometimes we think money or status, but wealth could mean, having a life comfortable with your family where money isn't a part of that conversation, right? You have built enough, maybe physical wealth, that you get to enjoy the actual wealth or something that you consider, which is time with the kids, or being on vacation, or drinking Mai Tai on the beach at 50 instead of 65. And so he talked about what that looks like for wealth. And what I love about Scott and what he does is he's always really practical about things. So his book's pretty dense about, here's how I would think about building wealth. Here's what it looks like from an entrepreneurial standpoint, investing standpoints. Here's some good best practices just for everyday people when budgeting. It's pretty fascinating the way that he approaches it. And so I'm 4 chapters into that, and I'm really enjoying his style of writing and the content so far.
Awesome. I'll have to pick that one up. I am a big fan of Scott Galloway. I listened to one of his podcasts, and I think he is very down to earth and very smart, and I like his voice.
Yeah.
It's easy to follow. So I'm definitely going to pick that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds really
He's a very
interesting.
non-conventional way of
Yeah.
talking. Yeah. Sorry, Alex.
No, it's just I like different approaches to the same topics that we hear about kind of constantly, and maybe there are kind of dated practices or ways of doing it that can be rethought through.
Mhm.
Mhm. So I am listening to a new podcast called LFG, which is by our friends over at Franchise Assembly. It is an unfiltered franchise education podcast. And so if you haven't tuned in yet, it is led by other smart people. We do know more than just the three of us, but it is led by Leanne Caruso and her partner, Michael Hyman, and it is a fantastic listen. If you hadn't had a chance to check it out, I encourage you to do so.
Absolutely will.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay, before we dig into our question, just a quick readout of our sponsors tag. So Dear Frannie is brought to you by Franchise Fractionals. Scaling your franchise doesn't mean going it alone. With Franchise Fractionals, you have access to the top tier talent you need when you need it. From finance to operations and marketing, our fractional executives have been where you want to go. Don't let the full-time commitment of executive roles hold you back. Visit Franchise Fractionals today to discover how our leaders can help pave the way for your franchise's success. All right, time to get into our question. Speaking of success, our question today is, how do I measure the success of digital marketing and/or marketing programs in general? What reporting and analysis should I expect from my marketing team? Obviously, all three of us have been in a place where we're reporting up on what we're doing and how we're accomplishing those things. So I think this is a perfect audience to bring this question to. And Will, I'm going to start with you for this one.
Yeah, I love this question. I'm a big data nerd though, so we have some differing some people, some marketers are have their strengths. I love data strategy. That's something I'm really excited about. So for me, one of the first things that I'm looking at when I'm talking about what drives success or what does success look like is understanding first, like, how do I measure that? What are my KPIs? And we all go there. We have to have KPIs, but I specifically will look at not only the primary KPIs, but I look at secondary KPIs. So the first thing I do in a brand is I'll audit it. Like, what are the things that drive success that everyone recognizes? Okay, it's the book appointment, it's the lead. But then I'm also looking at, like, for instance, one of the things that we do at the Good Feed store is you can book an appointment online. Great. Okay, well, that's an easy one, primary KPI. But then I might also look at how many people are clicking on get directions, because we actually get that quite a bit from our website, but also from our listings. We don't currently value that the same way that we would the booked appointment, for good reasons. But the fact that the question is, should we include that? What's the whole story telling? So for me, the data is really, really important. And I would say the first thing I think about is, does my report structure give me everything that I need to know? Do I have all these set up in place? Am I tracking everything from a UTM parameter standpoint? Getting back all the data that I need in order to start putting together that story looks like. So I'm not just looking at one KPI that drives revenue, but something else underneath it that might support that revenue as well. So there's a lot of things that initially that I'm looking at in order to gauge what success looks like.
So, and Will, I
I'll start
love
there.
that you went right there. Because I'm a data geek too. I'm more of a strategy data marketer than a creative marketer, and I am with you 100% on kind of how do you frame up what my activities are doing? How do I tell the story that they are successful? Now, I think that, what you're listening to is marketers who have been around the block a few times and understand I've got to show value to who I'm reporting into, number one, and I've got to make sure that what I've put in place is actually working. Now, what advice would you have for CEOs who are maybe working with a junior marketer who maybe doesn't even know where to start? What kinds of things would you ask them, or when you're working with a junior marketer, how do you coach them on kind of, here's where I start to measure the success of my actions?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I actually think I'd probably handle it a little differently. If I'm talking to a CEO and he doesn't have, maybe he needs franchise fractionals to bring in a CMO, right? Because that is an important role to have. But let's say that it's me talking to a junior. I think one of the things that's most important for me when I'm coaching people that I work with is helping them understand how I think about the story and helping them understand why it's important. Because I think buy-in is key. If you're going to tell a good story, you have to understand what that story is and how all of these pieces fit in. So I'll just keep using the example I gave. Yes, booked appointments is an extremely important measure, But we can help if we can help them understand that. But you know that 70% or 60% or whatever the number is of our people who walk in our store don't make any appointments. They just walk right in. Well, then that book directions click or a metric becomes very valuable because now we can get at that idea of what's our market doing to influence walk-ins versus booked appointments. So I think telling the story is really important because once you get them to understand that, then they go into Google Analytics or they go into the creative or they go into the advertising they're looking at with that frame of mind. And they don't just think, well, I'm sorry, what was the booked appointment number? And they report on that because at the end of the day, anybody can do that. So I think as a CEO, coaching those things down to your people as well is really important. What's going to matter? What's going to move the business forward? And don't just think about what drives dollars necessarily, what's also affecting that bottom line revenue too. So that would be the first thing I'd go about. Of course, there are technical things that I would coach on, but I think if we don't get that first part right, like what is the story of our customer journey, then the rest of it'll be harder.
And Will, you hit on something that I think is often missed and is really elementary and easy to do, sharing numbers with your whole company. So sharing with your company the numbers that are important to you. So as the CEO, you're looking at your revenue numbers, you should be looking at your same store sales numbers, you should be looking at your traffic counts as well as your check. Those three numbers should be shared company-wide, no matter the level that you're dealing with, because then to your point, you get to show the people that are on the front lines, okay, same store sales matters to me. How are you impacting same store sales today? And so, that trickle down, that buy-in happens when you open your books and not, you don't need to open your books, but once you start sharing the metrics that are important to you. One of my mentors used to say, you can't move what you don't measure, right? We've all heard that. But that is, that's a tenet. And that if you are not sharing out, okay, how are we doing week over week over week with these numbers that are important to us, there's no way that you can expect your marketer to be able to feed you information that fits within that narrative, right? Because typically you're looking for your marketing team to tell you, why are my sales up or why are my sales down? Well, if they're not tracking with you, they don't know, and they're not going to be able to kind of add to that narrative. Alex, what would you add to this conversation?
That's all spot on. There's been, in my experience, a lot of also like explaining up too and educating up, because I think a lot of times we're just like, but like booked appointments. I'm like, there's more. And and I'm thinking specifically of in my last role, we ran an in-house digital agency for the franchisees to pay into and kind of act as its own ecosystem. When we took it over, the only ads we're running were lead generation. And very quickly, we kind of had like why are we doing just this again? And so we added different ad sets. One was, conversions, just, book your appointment, kept lead gen, and then also traffic. And we used traffic ads in newer areas to kind of flood the pages and then start doing redirecting or retargeting. And that was very confusing to people as to, they're like, but I'm not seeing booked appointments. That's not doing anything. I'm like, it's not doing anything yet. Well, actually, no, I take that back. It's doing a lot, but it's not maybe getting that book conversion right now. So I found Catherine, to your point, we would be explaining these numbers on a monthly basis of why are we doing what we're doing. And we would talk about it with ops, with everybody, so that when they are talking to franchisees, they understand it. And they understood, the if this, studio or location needs help with this, then we are running this type of ad. And here's what we expect to see. And then it all comes down to, I think, expectations as well. If you are expecting your digital ads to be 100% of your bookings, you're going to be really disappointed, and nothing is going to look successful then. So I think just saying, like, there's no way it's going to make up for all of our or constitute all of our bookings, and that's okay. Like, it would be crazy if it did. And so here's where we also need to focus our marketing efforts. Marketing is more than just digital. So kind of further explaining the grassroots and community efforts and all that good stuff. So that was a long-winded way of answering that question.
No, it's good. And I think that when I listen to this question, I think about the types of brands that I work with, which haven't yet had a marketing leader, and they don't know what the value of marketing is because they haven't, had someone really understand how do I report up to a CEO on what my activities are. And the CEO isn't yet prepared to say they're doing well or they're not doing well. So, I think to kind of carry through the conversation that we were having about kind of coaching those junior marketers, what advice would you have for a CEO that has a junior marketer? Isn't, a lot of brands aren't ready for a senior marketer yet, and that's fine. But how do you make sure that your junior marketer is working on things that are measurable and that are going to impact the bottom line? What kind of, how do you hold them accountable, I guess, is the question that I'm trying to ask. Any thoughts on that?
I'll go first. One thing that I think is dancing around this conversation that I think is so important for us to just acknowledge is that franchise marketing, but just marketers in general, it is difficult for us to do what we do well because for us to be successful, we're not staying just in our silo. We can't afford to do that. If you're going to be successful, you have to kind of understand how operations is handling the leads that you're bringing in. You all have to understand how we affect finance, but then you have to be able to communicate with both of those groups, let alone your executive, to understand, okay, well, I know this says impressions, but let me tell you what this means, right? Or I know this is just a secondary key, but let me have to tell you how it affects the bottom line. It is really difficult, I think, if you're doing marketing well, to continue to show value because there's so much that goes into what we do. If I'm in a CEO position and I'm looking down and I got a junior marketer underneath me, I would do the best that I can to help them understand what success looked like. Catherine, I thought you hit the nail on the head with the opening of the books example. I would say that as a CEO, I see this role as like no one loves the brand more than you do, and no one understands exactly how customers purchase and understand the experience better than you. If someone else in your organization knows it better, you're not doing a job well. I think a CEO should be that champion because then they'll be able to say, hey, junior marketer, look, I don't get what an impression is necessarily, or I don't understand what Google Tag is supposed to do for me. But let me tell you what the customer experience looks like. Let me bring you to store. Let me tell you about every step in the journey, and then enable that junior marketer to learn about, hey, okay, I know that they're on their phones before they come in. So let me understand what I could do from this point to this point that I might track to show value then to my CEO. So I think you're a CEO really trying to lean into educating your junior people on the experience, the process. Give them a day in the office, the store. We do this every quarter. It's mandatory for us that we go and spend an entire day with one of our stores. I think stuff is super valuable. So if you can't do technical stuff, get that as a CEO. Bring them the experience and help them
Yep.
understand at every level how the business operates and works.
Yep. 100%. If you're not spending time in your locations, you are missing the mark as a marketer for sure.
And then I think, I don't know if this completely answers it, but my head kind of went to, franchising is an interesting space in terms of building out marketing teams. There's a lot of hesitation to building out a large scale team. I was once part of a team of 5 and people were amazed at how large that was, when to us it really didn't feel large at all. So I think when it comes to junior marketers, I would think around like, what else is on, like, what are their job expectations? What else is it like? Do they have enough breathing room to learn and become growing experts in digital? Are we allowing for that? Because if they are in charge of everything, all franchisee coordination, handling all these day-to-day, getting the print goods and making sure that vendor is taken care of, social media, getting that content, like they are going to have this much space available to really understand. Maybe they'll understand in a conversation, but it gets dropped through in terms of success metrics or what have you. But I think it is a tough role. It can be a tough role if you are a person of one who has to learn every aspect. And so I think giving some space in order for them to become these experts, especially if you're a CEO who needs help understanding digital, I would give more breathing room for them to learn, and I would invest in that, because you're going to get a really strong marketer as a result. Invest in that person and that, their ability to learn.
Yep. Good. All right. So before we sign off, I'm gonna play this top 3 game again with y'all. When you're thinking about marketing metrics, what are the top 3 outside of same-store sales revenue, same-store sales traffic, and your check count? Because those are the 3, right, that are going to drive all revenue. Besides those, what are the metrics or the KPIs that you guys kind of hold to look at on your marketing teams? And I'll go first again so that I'll give you all some time to think about it. But I think about, and I'm going to steal this from Will, because I bet this is one of his too, but thinking about where's your traffic coming from? What is your lead measure to then get to that traffic? So whether it's website impressions or unique visits, or it's downloads to your app, or whatever it is that happens before they get to your location, let's measure that. And then I would say I like to look at things in percentages. And so I like to look at, what percentage of dollars are my franchisees able to spend on working media, and how do I drive that percentage up? Because the more that they spend on working media, and by working media, I mean paid media, the bigger my brand is going to feel, and the more, credibility they're going to have in the market. And then I think the third thing that I would look at would be your social media following. I know that can be a vanity metric at times, but when you're thinking about a growing brand that's trying to attract attention, that can be another lead measure. And when I say lead, it means it's a precursor to things to come. And so looking at kind of, is my Facebook group or my Instagram group growing, because that means that I'm building brand awareness with people. And with Instagram, it might be, instead of your feed, it might be your reach with your posts. And so that, I think, is another kind of good indicator for, yes, my brand awareness is growing. All right, Alex, I'll put you on the spot first.
I like looking at very, very broad website visits, especially if our locations have not really changed, but that number is going up. Obviously, if we're adding locations actively, I should hope it's going up. But on the flip side, if it's going down or staying stagnant, but to me, I am very interested in brand awareness, obviously. So I like understand. I mean, I don't want to echo everything you said, but I really do like looking at that, because it's telling me, especially if I'm seeing on social media, ooh, we're doing well. I think, and any ability that we have to look at reshares. Now, this is niche, but I ran an influencer program, and the amount of engagement, like the volume of engagement that was happening because of those. And so it was like our dollars are multiplying without us even needing to add to that budget, because the engagement is driving. And on Instagram, I would drill down even more and say, like, shares and saves, bless you, especially saves, because it means like they like what they're seeing. They want to come back to it, hopefully to take an action. And then the third one, we're not allowed to use revenue. Oh, this is tough. I would say any chance there is to measure franchisee adoption of a thing. So how many franchisees are using an approved vendor versus not? How many franchisees are using what we have for if you provide social content and they're able to buy into it or not, say it's free. How many of them are actually using the content? So anything that measures, and hopefully it's increasing, meaning we as marketers or corporate marketers are doing a better job. So yeah, yeah.
All right, well, we might have taken them all up.
Oh, no, I think you guys have said fantastic things, and I think what's good about this conversation is whoever's listening to know that there are a lot of things that are valuable here. So there's not like, well, like Catherine's 3 or Alex's 3. They're all going to be valuable. So what I say is, assuming you have revenue, the first thing I would track is, what's your CPA? You have to know that.
Yes.
What is your cost per acquisition?
Yep.
Huh? Yeah.
I wanted to explain CPA.
Yeah. Sorry. cost per acquisition. So what does it cost you to get a customer? But that almost is too elementary, to be honest. If you're sitting there and your marketing executive listening to this, you should already have CPA. You should track CPA by source. That's the one thing I would say. Just if we're going to drill down a little further, CPA by, because then you can decide where to pour more of your money into, or tell your franchisees, hey, search drives more or drives a better CPA than social does, or whatever the so source or track your CPA and track it by source if you can. The other thing that I like that you guys hadn't mentioned was a click-through rate. Now, for marketers only, CEOs can tune out because this is going to be too much. But I think for marketers, your click-through rate helps you understand the engagement that your ad has against the interest of that consumer. So you know that your creative is doing a good job when your click-through rate is high, or your ad copy is doing a great job when your click-through rate is high. It's speaking to the consumer where they're at and what they want to know, and so they go to your website. That's a good metric because you're going to put things out there. The question is, how well is it working? The only way you can get more revenue through the door is if people understand or are actually engaging with the things that you're putting out there, the content you're putting out there. So in advertising, it might be click-through rate. It might be a different metric if you're doing a different channel, but click-through rate's a big one for me. The other thing I like that I'll put as a non-marketing metric in particular is tracking the amount of money your franchisees are spending on different channels, like the marketing mix. Are they spending not necessarily like it's $600 to digital and it's $300 to social, but what does their full budget look like? Because as a franchise system, you're never going to be able to, from the corporate level, outspend all of your franchisees' money they're spending in each location. You want to benefit from the reach and the bet that they can accomplish as a group. So if you have 250 locations all spending, $5,000, that's going to be way better for you than you trying to spend that $5,000 or the equivalent at the corporate level by yourself. So I would make sure that you're tracking that. Or is that moving in the right direction? Are people adopting what you're talking about? The more money that your franchisees invest, the better off they'll be, but also the better off the brand will be. So
Awesome. Well, those were so awesome to end on. I think that you guys nailed it on the things that we can measure as marketers that will really drive impact on your franchise brand. So thank you guys again for joining me on Dear Frannie. And if you have questions for us, please don't hesitate to email at hello@franchisefractionals.com so that we can bring the experts together to answer them. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
thanks, Catherine.